Okay, decentralized identity management, Envision Blockchain, Cambridge Blockchain. Some really interesting news occurred just this past week where we were proud to say that a company, Cambridge Blockchain, who's very well established in the industry and has a sincere and professional focus strictly on identity management, specifically within the blockchain space, that we call decentralized identity management. It's very well known across the industry. Has just recently partnered with us, Envision Blockchain, and we're really happy to announce this partnership. You can find a whole lot of information that's been posted online, as well as at the Cambridge Blockchain website. If you notice at the bottom of their website, you can go and visit the press release, and all of the links associated are in there. But what's really amazing is that we're able to formulate this partnership, and bring their solution to the Azure marketplace. And that really helps with decentralized identity and identity management, data privacy, security in general for various different enterprise organizations across multiple industry verticals. And having this sort of accessibility through the Azure marketplace, we feel is very critical. And we're going to go through a series of interesting topics today that once I introduce the CEO, Matthew Commons, he's going to take you on a bit of a journey as far as what they have accomplished, and moving forward, you're going to get to see a little bit one of their demos. So it's actually really interesting, and appreciate your patience. Stay tuned as we go through here. Save the best for last. So just a brief plug about Envision Blockchain. I know that if you visit us in the past, we are a blockchain systems integrator. We have a specific focus on enterprise blockchain adoption, and we assist organizations, in various different stages of their journey of enterprise blockchain adoption through a series of blockchain services, modern cloud and on-prem solutions, and of course workshops. And if you notice at the top of that workshops list, this is going to be a topic that we really focus on today. Decentralized identity management, the half-day workshop that's listed now in the Azure marketplace. So just a brief background and understanding as far as what is a systems integrator, what do we really do, and what are we providing for Cambridge Blockchain so that you can further understand how this partnership is really working. Likewise, you can really begin leveraging the benefits of this Cambridge Blockchain solution that Matt is going to be speaking about today. So with that in mind, we have the basic setup that you're likely very accustomed to within enterprise architecture. With the exception of the one piece on the right there, you have this new component, this blockchain, which is also another piece of modern cloud. And typically in any sort of architecture, systems integration, you have some sort of ERP, perhaps some sort of IoT device or whatever the input may be, feeding a specific API, which of course pushes information over to a database, which is normalized, which feeds some sort of web job and pushes information, in this case, which it can be selected which information, and we can go through a whole lot of that information here in just a little bit, over to this blockchain piece. And the blockchain ledger then picks up this information, which sends it back to this web API, parses it out to a web application, which could obviously then take various different inputs. Ultimately, you have the option of having that information sent back, so on and so forth. So that's essentially what this model really looks like, and how it's beginning to leverage this blockchain component, which can of course be shared across various different networks. And we can get into that in just a little bit. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Matt Commons. He's the CEO of Cambridge Blockchain Solutions, and he's going to take you on a little bit of a tour and journey through some of the great work that they've done. Matt.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jason. It's great to be working with you and Dan, and really excited to be announcing the news of our partnership. Jason and I have known each other and have done business together over the years, and we're really excited to be officially announcing this and looking forward to what we can do together, especially in the U.S. Envision really brings a whole host of really complementary services to Cambridge Blockchain. Certainly, we're thrilled about the relationship they have with Microsoft as a Microsoft partner, and particularly enthusiastic about the work we're doing together on the Azure Marketplace, and more to come on that. I think Microsoft is really rolling out a whole number of different blockchain tools that can be complementary, and they have the Workbench, that's been out for a while. Now starting to have Azure Blockchain Service, and of course a whole variety of different Microsoft identity features such as Active Directory and so forth. That as we go on our journey and are looking to expand what we're doing in Azure, Envision's a key partner, and really looking forward to that. And also, as we deal with different enterprise customers, Envision provides a variety of different services in terms of being able to help just figure out use cases. Identity is something that touches almost all aspects of business, whether employee identity or dealing with different customers, partners, suppliers, and trying to figure out how to map on the potential of these new technologies to existing businesses is really critical. And of course, integrating and deploying those into production. So just as a little bit of background on Cambridge Blockchain. So our name is Cambridge Blockchain because we're based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Founded the company together with Alex Oberhauser, who's our Chief Technology Officer and is also here on the call almost 5 years ago. And based on the campus of MIT, we work pretty closely with the MIT Media Lab. That's been a great place for us to get started and work with some of the world's leading digital identity research scientists. And as we got started, and have grown our company, some of the early traction we had, although we've always been based in the U.S., actually came from Europe. So I'll be talking here about some of the European examples that we have, and a lot of it really comes down to the fact that we make software for digital identity, and a big part of that is around data privacy. And if you're making software for that has data privacy, some of the early traction came because Europe was a real leader in establishing some of those data privacy laws like GDPR. So we'll go through some of those case studies. And then, it's really something that is an increasing trend in the U.S. as well as around the world. And we're really enthusiastic that there's, now the California data privacy law and a whole number of other states are looking at this, and just much more public awareness and perception of this as an issue. So those are some kind of macro trends behind there. But of course, as we look, we've always been a U.S.-based company, and now as we're looking to really expand our U.S. deployment footprint, this relationship with Envision is critical, and really excited about it. So, when you think about Cambridge Blockchain and what our software does, it's really about storing, sharing, and validating identity data. And that identity data can be shared across different companies. It can be shared across different geographies. And I think one of the key things about our system compared to others in the space is that we are exclusively B2B. We really focus only on enterprises, and our software has been designed with existing assets in mind. We can talk a little bit about how we got started in the banking sector, specifically in Europe. But generally speaking, where we really differentiated is in industries that may have a little bit higher requirements around security, a little bit higher requirements around privacy, regulation, and so forth. And some of the early areas that we've started with have been sharing data for onboarding. So customers opening accounts at different banks and insurance companies and so forth, and doing that in an environment of increasing data privacy regulations, increasing open API regulations in the banking sector and beyond. But while that's where we've started, and we will be going through some specific use cases as examples from European banking sector. But really, this architecture is incredibly flexible, and we're really excited to look at this and have some things we're working on now in sharing other types of data. It can be medical data, it can be sensitive supplier data. This is really agnostic to the particular type of sensitive data that's being shared. But I will be describing it in the areas where we've gotten started, which has been, with enterprises, regulated enterprises, especially in the financial services space, which has been some of the first areas we've been working with. One opportunity that we have been working on here and announced the launch over the summer is a company called Lux Trust that is based in Luxembourg and is deploying our software together with a group of financial institutions. Lux Trust is owned by and serves some of the main retail banks in Luxembourg, and it's actually owned together with the government there. So what Lux Trust does is they provide a common set of login or authentication credentials that basically the whole country uses. And with Cambridge blockchain software plugged into that, they're able to offer a service called ID Keep that allows any of the users, essentially anyone that has a bank account or pays taxes in Luxembourg, can have access to what we call a personal data service that stores all of their structured identity data, and they can share that across the entire ecosystem there, whether it's for financial institutions, getting loans or credit cards or insurance products, or ultimately medical reimbursements, all different types of things. But it's done in a pretty solid environment from a security perspective. It's very highly regulated, so everything's got to be in ISO 27000 data center, SOC 2 compliant, meeting these very strong standards around authentication as well as data privacy, anti-money laundering, and so forth. And I can just kind of talk through a little bit about what these what this particular use case looks like. If I can get the screen here, let me. Okay, here we go. So the way that this works is one of the core elements of what Cambridge Blockchain provides is what you see in the upper left-hand corner, which is something called a personal data service. And a personal data service is something that stores identity data for either an individual or it can also be for a company or even a connected device. But individuals and companies are where we're starting with in Luxembourg and some of the early uses. But essentially what that does, the personal data service, stores all of the user's structured identity data. So in a retail banking example, it'd be about 30 different attributes about a user, things like their name and address, maybe a scan of their passport, for tax ID number. For a corporate user, it could be more attributes. It could be their articles of incorporation, beneficial owners, authorized signatories, what have you. In the system, we have this role, which you see on the left, known as a trusted party. And a trusted party is essentially anyone that validates data. So in a banking example, that would probably be, the bank itself is going to validate something. Maybe you walk into the bank, they take a copy of your passport, scan it in, and they're validating that it seemed to be a genuine copy and it seemed to match your likeness. Okay, so in that case, the bank is the trusted party, and they sign what's called an attestation on a shared blockchain. And that attestation takes the form of a cryptographic proof or a cryptographic hash. It's a one-way privacy-preserving function, kind of like a fingerprint of that data. And what that means then is once you have onboarded with any one institution there in the system, it becomes very, very easy for the end user to take their data and port it to any other institution which wants to consume it, which we call a service provider in our parlance here. So the way that this system works, again, very strong data privacy rules that we've designed to here. The service provider in this case makes a request of the user for whatever personal data they need. The user has to provide consent to share that. And the service provider in a banking example or financial services example is still going to perform the know your customer check on that individual, but they're going to start with a much thicker file of data about them. And by comparing that data to those attestations on the blockchain, they can validate exactly who checked what when about each different data element. So the onboarding process can be much faster, lower cost, and a better customer experience. In this case, you can even have the regulator hosting a node of the blockchain as well. Not that the regulator will actually see all the data about every identity transaction that's going forward, But if there is some instance of fraud or money laundering, the regulator has a node of the blockchain so they can get to the root of the issue very quickly. So, the basic ecosystem here is one as you see, you think, where is this deployed? This is deployed in systems where you don't necessarily want one party to see everything and control everything. I think that's kind of a common theme across blockchain deployments. You want to be doing these in areas where it really adds a lot of value versus a centralized database. If you're just dealing with one party and everybody trusts that one party to see everything and know everything, that's probably not the best use case to work with. But when you're dealing with identity data, especially in a pretty sensitive context where data privacy, customer control, customer visibility into what they're doing is so important, and I think a lot of enterprises around the world are looking to differentiate themselves in terms of how they manage personal data. This is something that really adds a lot of value, both operational value for the enterprises involved, but also a little bit more intangible value that enterprises are looking to really demonstrate to their customers and users that they do value data privacy, they take it seriously, and it's not just the standard MO of giving a big long list of terms and conditions and clicking yes, and users have no idea where their data is going or how it's being used. So this is kind of the general overview, but as I mentioned, it goes well beyond just using this for your customer checks and onboarding financial institutions. So I wanted to share a couple other examples of how we're using this and how we're going to market here that I think can provide some ideas. Okay, right here. So there are three specific examples we can talk about. So one is a strategic partnership that we have with a group called IHS Markit. IHS Markit is a reference data provider, and they serve most of a lot of the very large bulge bracket banks, UBS, BNP Paribas, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citi, et cetera. And they have traditionally offered their services through a centralized model. So they have something called KYC.com, and you can go and you can access from a centralized source a lot of this identity data. But they're seeing big movements as we are globally towards more data privacy, more user control, and real demand for this type of data about individuals and companies to be managed, not necessarily always in a centralized repository, but something where the user themselves has access and control of their own data. So we're working with them. Specifically, the area we started with have been on corporate and institutional identity data. But again, it goes well beyond that, and IHS Markit manages this type of data around the world, and for industries well beyond that. So again, starting in the financial services space, but moving broadly. PayPal is our most recent investor. This is interesting because it's where we've started with them is more of an internal use case. PayPal, as you know, is grow quite rapidly. They spend about $4 billion per year on acquisitions. So they're buying different platforms, payment platforms and so forth around the world, all of which kind of have a slightly different regulatory environment, slightly different customer focus, and it's just something that's really difficult to integrate into one standard compliance system for all their different businesses around the world. But they want to be able to offer good customer service. They want to be able to have users on board with one platform and then be able to use some of their other payment platforms. So managing this internally is important, but also the idea of being able to share this data outside as well. It's not something that we're starting with, but that's part of the vision. So some of these different use cases are there. So IHS Markit, something conventionally has been a centralized model, but looking at moving to something distributed. PayPal, something connecting up different divisions of one organization and starting there, and then eventually sharing that data outside of their organization. And finally, Foxconn, which is, as many of you know, the world's largest contract manufacturer. They are, the largest supplier to Apple and Dell and Sony. They own Sharp. Major player here. And here, what's interesting is that we're not even using this in this particular use case for one that is dealing with personal identity data. This is really much more about supplier identity and managing sensitive data around supply chain. Foxconn is an entity that has huge amounts of suppliers all around the world, and they're trying to help them get financing. In order to do that, though, they have to share and manage a lot of sensitive documentation about their products. And this is examples where we're dealing with sensitive data, but it's sensitive from a commercial perspective, not necessarily because of strict data privacy rules in this particular case. So, these are all examples that, whatever your business is, if you're dealing with sensitive data that really needs to be shared on a need-to-know basis, but the recipient of that needs to have a very high degree of confidence in that data. This is a specific example and could be a good use case to explore together. And the common need here, again, policy-driven sharing of sensitive data. And I say policy-driven because it's something that, well, we talk a lot about GDPR. We've architected our system that's really just an example of a policy. In our system, we can model whatever type of attribute structures or schemas are appropriate for whatever your use case is. We're not starting with Luxembourg retail banking and then trying to shoehorn that into your organization. We're really starting with your data schema and then really your data policies as well. So hey, in some cases, something that is GDPR-like may be the right thing to do. But if you're using different types of data, if you're using medical data and it's HIPAA compliance, that's the type of thing that you'll be wanting to model out in our system. So I think those are some examples, pleased to share, and and I think we can go into more in the Q&A session, but I think that's probably good for right now. So Jason, I'll turn it back over to you, and you can talk more about what we just announced and the workshop that we're offering.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I really appreciate that, and I think that you covered some excellent ground there. One major thing is we have an old saying that when the number one rule to blockchain is we just don't talk about blockchain, and you did an excellent job there, really highlighting the core strengths and values that really back identity management. The decentralization is really an area that our organization is now focusing on, in conjunction with Cambridge Blockchain, to really help accelerate enterprise organizations and increase revenue, look to help assist in driving down overhead or costs, and really create this seamless process of various different employee or corporate onboarding, which really helps in deriving that sort of value, and that's really where a lot of Matt was just explaining with respect to the various different enterprise organizations that have really paid special interest in buy-in to the Cambridge Blockchain solution. Moreover, obviously, the deployment in Luxembourg is quite the feat, and really excited that we have this opportunity to partner with Cambridge Blockchain in this capacity. So without further ado, I think that it's at this point in time really appropriate to begin discussing a little bit about the half-day workshop that we've collaboratively put together and launched into the Azure Marketplace. So as a full consultancy, Envision Blockchain's Solutions has really taken process and step-by-step, process by process, a specific breakdown, and help structure this specific workshop to help the ease and the adoption of this identity management tool. So what is really important is providing this sort of this experience to the client, to the enterprise organization, with respect to adoption, right? How do we go from point A to point B with all of the information that was just covered? And that's really what we're going to focus on for the remainder of this webinar. So this half-day workshop is currently listed in the Azure Marketplace, as you can see. And you can feel free to go ahead and visit the Azure Marketplace and go ahead and take a look. There's a bunch more information and some downloads there in addition. So if there's any questions, feel free again. If you're just joining or just joined recently, there is a Q&A section at the top of the screen. So if you want to ask any questions to any of the panelists, feel free. So with that in mind, let's journey into a little bit of the agenda for this half-day workshop. And really what we can see is at this point in time, we should have really established your company's use case as it pertains to where identity management is really going to make a great fit, how we're going to really begin deriving value, leveraging the Cambridge blockchain solution. And there may be a series of logistics phone calls or meetings beforehand prior to having this half-day workshop with your stakeholders. But generally speaking, what we're looking at doing is really beginning to introduce the high-level concept, drill down into this use case, and begin understanding the regulatory compliance needs that are directly related to your enterprise use case with respect to identity management. So what you can see here is kind of the last step. We have this piece where we establish the data mapping required for the selected decentralized identity management use case. And within that is where the magic happens, right? So that's what we're going to show you here in just a little bit. Alex Oberhauser, the CTO of Cambridge Blockchain, will be going ahead and showing you that live, actually. So with that in mind, once we have this enterprise use case and we have all of the information that pertains directly to this use case, and we're sitting in meeting with your either C-level suite or whoever the project stakeholders may be that are interested in this identity management use case, really what we're going to be doing once we establish those regulatory compliance needs, as Matt said, a lot of the value is driven through these policies, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But we begin with this data mapping schema, right, which we'll begin to show you. And we're going to show it to you in a very specific order that's going to hopefully make some good sense to you. And as a result, once we have this data mapping, we are going to work on some customized and consumable APIs, which you'll receive after the workshop, along with some documentation. And of course, you will be able to then leverage those APIs to begin interacting with a custom developed smart contract that's based on this data schema. Now, obviously this happens after the workshop, but realistically that's where the value is. Now you can begin leveraging these APIs, not necessarily the user interface right away, but the APIs to begin understanding how the data mapping exercise or the data schema and the policies as it relates to the identity attributes begin providing value and accelerating revenues, driving down costs for your organization. So as you can see here, the first thing that we need to do is we first need to identify and define these policies, or if we rephrase it, what are the regulatory and compliance needs that comprise or that you can derive value from out of this identity management use case. So a policy example, which we see on the left-hand side there, could be data can be transferred within the European Union member states, as an example, or data can be used for product and service statistics or direct marketing purposes. So with that in mind, we initially go and begin defining all these compliance regulatory needs and creating these policy examples, defining them, which later on in discussion in this half-day workshop, we can begin defining now the attributes, your first name, your last name, whatever information, whatever attributes are most pertinent to this use case that your organization utilizes. And we ultimately wind up with this catalog, this policy catalog. And of course, we now can map all of the attributes to these associated policies. And now what you wind up with is literally this identity management use case. You are mapping this identity, which is identity is of course comprised of various different attributes, to the specific policies or the associated regulatory compliance needs that are driving this value. And you know, that's essentially the end result. That's the main makeup of this half-day workshop. But leading up to it, as I had mentioned, this workshop is really established after we have a brief use case assessment, which we obviously can go into more detail with you if you have any of those specific interests, or if you haven't begin to isolate or focus, drill down on that specific use case. And we have an array of information for you, an array of activities that we can guide you through. This is something that Envision Blockchain is specialized in, and what we do on the daily basis. So with that in mind, what I think would be appropriate now is to hand this off to Alex, who is the CTO of Cambridge Blockchain, and he's going to help guide you through a little bit of a demo of what it would look like on a UI to begin entering these policies and begin building this policy catalog that we can begin ultimately mapping these attributes to. So with that in mind, Alex, happy to introduce you.
Yeah, so appreciate it. So I will walk you through some screens now, basically, that explains how to define this attribute catalog. It also, as you see here, it basically shows that we have some pre-populated attributes like first name, last name, gender, work title, and so on. But some of these attributes, they are encrypted. That means basically they are secured cryptographically client-side. So that's basically a choice that you can make when you are adding a new attribute. So if you are in the healthcare space, and so let me go back and show you. So the blood type, so we don't have a blood type field yet, but our participants of the system, the stakeholder of the system, they need to share the blood type with each other in some capacity. So basically that screen allows you, so that process allows you to define a new attribute that we are calling blood type. Basically, the state is active, clearly, so we want participants to use that and basically share with each other the data type string, let's say, and because it's relatively sensitive, we want to have that encrypted to basically protect that from eavesdropping. Some description here that you can remember what that is. Blood type should be relatively clear. So as you've seen, I'm automatically signed out. That's one of the security features that basically after some time of inactivity, you are signed out of the system, and not a problem. So we can repeat that step easily after signing in. So as we said, we need to, we want to have that encrypted because it's sensitive. So now what we have done, we have basically created that attribute. If we go back to our attribute catalog, we will see a new entry, blood type, right? And that means basically that's now globally accessible across every stakeholder. As we mentioned previously, there are also rules that are governing the sharing process. So we have some predefined rules here. I mean, they're mainly GDPR, but as we have outlined, there could be any rule basically there. So let's create a policy X, X1 state, but the same thing, we want to have that active. That means basically a service provider, when they're creating a service definition, can associate them in that specific case to an attribute. The obligation is basically data will be deleted after 3 years or 3 years of inactivity. Prohibition, that's basically similar to that. Data cannot be kept after 3 years of inactivity, and permission, we say inactive data can be kept up to 3 years. Of course, that policy can be more complicated than that. So now we have created that. The policies, they're also accessible across each stakeholder of this system. You see the obligation, the permission, and the prohibition that we entered, we have basically seen here. Right? So every step that I've executed here is basically done by a platform admin to make sure that everyone uses the same data schema. What I'm switching now to is an identity owner or customer, basically. That customer, so we can sign in there. So we basically see that this customer controls multiple entities like a company and service provider and a trust IP. So what I want to do now is basically I want to create, so I want to show you how you can use that newly created entry, like the blood type, let's say CO negative, to basically create that inside the personal data always. At that point, that content, that attribute is not shared yet with any counterparty. So it's exclusively controlled by you as customer. So that's that. Let me walk you through a service consumption. A service consumption is basically a process where you are sharing attributes with some counterparty, like an SP, basically. So let me walk you through that. So it's basically, you see the refinance loan here. So Fred, our customer that we are sending, wants to refinance loan. So he goes through the process, and in order to do that, he has to accept some policies, and he also needs to basically share some specific attributes with the SP. And as you see here, each attribute has also some rules associated how the data is handled. So we basically confirm that. So I can go back to clarify that. So first name, department, organization name, and last name. These 4 attributes, they are now shared with SP. At that stage, so basically when we are consuming that service, when we are activating that, we are capturing a proof inside the blockchain that the service provider can cross-check them. Right? So that's generally the flow. So we submit that now. So that means we created a draft. So we haven't shared that yet. Right? So it's basically we created a new service locally. Then what we want to do, we want to consume that service, and we're doing that by basically activating it. And when we do that, it triggers basically the process where we are only sharing the attributes that we have specified, and where we're giving consent basically to the policies outlined here. So that was successful, as you see, and so now we are consuming the refinance loan basically by having consent to the policies and by having shared the right attribute sets.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that brief there. That's some really great stuff. And one thing that we really didn't cover that we can go into more detail about, if you have any questions as to how to get involved with this workshop and what really precludes this workshop with respect to the use case assessment and the various different business processes involved in isolating, a specific use case as it pertains to identity management. This is definitely something that we can help you out with. And as mentioned, we have a series of activities as well as additional workshops that are in the Microsoft Azure Marketplace that can assist in that manner as well. I know that the Cambridge blockchain team would be more than happy to also assist within those workshops, and we can help you not only in the finance use cases, but as well as, you know, an array of other verticals. As Alex was mentioning, you know, he had gone through a use case of within healthcare. He had gone through you know, several others. You know, our background also consists heavily within the supply chain finance use case, supply chain provenance, track and trace, series of, you know, wealth of information within aerospace, and of course, various other industry verticals and sectors that we'd be happy to share with you. With that in mind, you know, I'd like to open the mic up, or open this opportunity right now for some questions or some discussions.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, in terms of the partnership, I think some of the things that we're excited about, you know, you've talked about in some previous webinars and things like that. And I know we don't necessarily have the slides up here right now, but I kind of mentioned it a little bit, and that was the Azure Blockchain Service, which, you know, I think when we think about what Cambridge Blockchain is doing and what we're offering, and why we're so excited about the Azure platform in general, it is really that it affords us the opportunity to offer a much more complete service to the market than, you know, than we have with, you know, what we started with was, you know, hey, Cambridge Blockchain makes the software, or really this identity application that sits on top of blockchain. We license it out to somebody like, you know, could be a Lux Trust or a large enterprise, and then, you know, it kind of is deployed on top of some type of blockchain infrastructure, whether that's through a consortium or the organization sets it up itself, and so forth. And you know, we've always been able to host this in any kind of public or private cloud or on-prem or what have you. So Azure for us is a lot more than just hosting, and it you know, really offers some of these complementary services, one of which I think in particular is the Azure Blockchain Service. So Jason, I wanted to see, maybe you could just mention a couple things briefly about that, just you know, as a highlight, because I think it's a critical offering that really, for organizations to get spun up much faster, and actually having some you know, some contractual guarantees of Microsoft behind this, I think can you know, make this easier for POCs and pilots all the way up to you know, full production. You know, when you're looking at establishing that underlying infrastructure, it's you know, it's really important to be able to do that, and having this as a service there, I think is an important complementary for what Cambridge Blockchain is doing. So, you know, maybe you can just mention that that briefly, kind of the highlights of sort of how that might work together with something like Cambridge Blockchain.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's an excellent point of conversation. You know, it's actually really interesting. Microsoft has definitely taken a very interesting approach to the blockchain technology in this emerging market. You know, a lot of organizations have been just trying to jump right on in and try to build out these grand solutions, you know, and Microsoft has really taken the position of, let's build out solutions to help with enterprise adoption. Let's try to establish the foundation first before we build this city, so to speak. And what they, you know, it was only about a year and a half ago that they really set out and had established the workbench, which, you know, as Matt had said, was really a proof of concept tool. It really helped with speed to market as it pertains to failing fast, right? Or helping iterate various different smart contracts and understanding the value of these decentralized applications. And as the industry has been evolving, Microsoft, you know, has really backed the evolution of this technology up with additional technologies, like Matt had mentioned, Azure Blockchain Service, which not only allows organizations to seamlessly just iterate on a proof of concept, but it allows a managed service of this infrastructure. And currently, what's available is the launch or this managed service for Quorum, you know, as it pertains to that ledger specifically. But just a brief overview. I mean, as it pertains to security, as it pertains to maintenance, that's really what Microsoft is really targeting. So, in addition to the rest of the infrastructure that they've been producing as a foundation layer for enterprise tooling as it pertains to blockchain, you know, realistically, they wanted to ensure security and maintenance first of the uptime for these specific applications. So with respect to security, there's various different, you know, plugs or benefits with respect to, you know, firewall rules and transaction nodes as it pertains to the various different data which is encrypted, authentication methods, and that's really where, you know, Cambridge blockchain can begin recognizing some serious value within authentication, key management, different things like that within Azure. Likewise, you know, of course, maintenance. We're talking about the uptime of decentralized applications and not having to monitor, if you will, and really spend on the maintenance or upkeep of this network. Just like all cloud services, this is a managed service. This is what is allowing your organization to free up this additional overhead, this additional capital, and again, it allows you to have this speed to market without this worry, backed by Microsoft's, you know, enterprise service level agreements, which is critical, right? We need to have some sort of liability when we're deploying these sort of networks and these solutions for all the clients or for all your users that are going to be leveraging this technology. So with respect to Azure Blockchain Service, those are some really high level and critical areas of opportunity that we see the evolution of this market taking shape or moving into. And Microsoft is definitely doing an excellent job in creating that ease for the market.
Great. Thanks a lot, Jason.
Yeah,
that's helpful. And if there's other questions on, you know, from the floor, you know, feel free to jump in or mention them in the box there. I think one thing that, you know, from our perspective, you know, as we're looking at the workshop and what we're offering together, you know, I think it's one of the things just kind of worth mentioning is trying to think through the right types of use cases here. And, you know, generally speaking, all these identity management use cases can, you know, there's kind of two distinct sets of benefits from them. A lot of them are around, you know, cost savings and efficiency improvements and so forth. And we found, and that's important, you know, if you're looking at KYC and onboarding, these are expensive processes, slow processes, and it's really helpful to have that. But we've found that for, especially for a new technology like blockchain, sometimes the decision process can be a little bit faster even, and there can be kind of more excitement at the executive level about something that's not just saving costs, but is also really allowing that organization to reach out, better serve customers, and really grow revenues. So it's about, you know, thinking, you know, are you going to just take an existing process and try to make it more efficient, or are you going to really transform that in a way that allows you to offer something new to reach out to new customers that you didn't before? And, you know, things with identity data are perfect for that, because, you know, you're looking at things about, hey, could I refer some of our customers to others? Could I, you know, have things vice versa? A lot of these opportunities to share data, whether it's for onboarding, whether it's for fraud, whether it's for other types of purposes, you know, they are increasingly going to have to be done with, you know, the right types of governance and control and you know, policies, whether it's GDPR or other types of things. And, you know, as part of this workshop, we really want to be having the ability to sit down and spend the time to work through these use cases and really map it out, because it's not always just completely intuitive of, hey, if I had decentralized identity management, here's how I would grow revenues. So the you know, the workshop is really the opportunity to spend some time together, both in pre-calls ahead of it, some questionnaires and so forth, and then be able to really hit the ground running in mapping out, hey, for our organization, what types of data sets are we dealing with internally across different parts of that organization? And then when we look at either on a push or pull basis, sharing that data or pulling data in outside of our organization, how do we do that? What's the ecosystem look like? And where could there be sort of some low-hanging fruit? Hey, if you establish this type of system with these kind of partners, you can really generate some economic value and some new revenues day one. And those types of opportunities are ones that there's often a little bit more enthusiasm about doing this in a way that goes after some new opportunity and some new sources of growth, as opposed to just saying we're going to have operational efficiencies, process improvements, and so forth. As important as those are, and there's plenty of of good use cases around those too. But it's that process of going through and mapping these out that's really critical, and what we're really pleased to be able to really offer more services together with Envision to help people and organizations do that. Because we recognize that it's not quite as simple as, hey, just go and log on to the Azure Marketplace and start dialing up your personal data services. Often there's this work ahead of time of, okay, how does this really work in my organization? How can I really map this out? How can I make the case to the C-suite and take this from initially proof of concept type deployment to show what it could be, to something that you can actually get live in production and generating significant new revenues for your business.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Matt. We really appreciate you and your team for joining the call. Thank you, Alex. It's definitely, like you said, a pleasure to have acquired this partnership, and we really look forward to developing. On the U.S. frontier is vast, and there's an array of value that's waiting to be unlocked. So, we look forward to this journey with Cambridge Blockchain, and thank you guys for your time. And we thank everybody who's participated today in this webinar, and we look forward to getting back in touch with you.
Thanks, everyone.